is Ryan Miller, and for the past 15 years, I've helped hundreds of people to raise millions of dollars for their funds and for their startups. If you're serious about raising money, launching your business, or taking your life to the next level, this show will give you the answers so that you too can enjoy your pursuit of making billions. Let's get into it.
Never take advice from someone you wouldn't trade places with. Well, at least that's how I operate. So my next guest is someone that we would all benefit from listening from when it comes to real estate and private equity, somewhere to the tune of over $300 million. So the question is, how are you going to use this information in your pursuit of making billions? Here we go. Hey, welcome to another episode of Making Billions. I'm your host, Ryan Miller, and today I have my dear friend, Jerome Maldonado. Jerome is the founder and CEO of J. Jacob Enterprises and Quad J Holdings. Over the span of his 20-year career, Jerome has done over $380 million in in-house transactions with $150 million in 2022 alone. So what this means is that Jerome is about to teach you and I the cheat codes on how to get started in making money in private equity and real estate deals so that you too can master the art of making billions. So Jerome, my man, welcome to the show, brother.
Ryan, bro, it's great to be here. Just being able to be here with you. And bro, I'll tell you, man, the Making Billions community, hands down, they're just absolutely amazing, man. I love your entire community, everything that you're doing, the guests that you have on your show. It's absolutely incredible. I love the content, the people, the information, just absolutely everything. Just such an incredible community, bro.
Wow. Thank you, man. That is, thanks for all the love. And yeah, you know, we've been fortunate to be in the top 2% in the world. We're in over 100 countries around the world, and all because of amazing guests like you. So I've done some research on your company and all these things. Like that lead in is just a tiny taste of what this guy's capable of, folks. So I'm sure our fans around the world would love to know, especially those starting out in real estate or private equity. Two questions. How do people who are getting started or even advanced, how do they win and how do they not lose?
Well, a lot of it's staying focused and staying consistent over the course of time. I'd say that my wins and accolades really have to do with my consistency. We all go through stuff, right? There's ups and downs. There's peaks and valleys. And really, those of us who really stay in the game and learn and continue to learn, we always tend to be the last ones at the fin. We're always the ones that tend to be at the finish line when the end of the day comes. And it really just has to do with consistency more than anything.
Awesome, man. I've seen some of the things you and I have talked about, and I'm sure working with, say, you know, this overused phrase OPM or other people's money, you know, that's a big part of getting started in private equity, real estate, or any private investment, especially anyone listening to a show called Making Billions is probably interested in realizing that in their life. A big part of that is working with other people's money. For beginners out there, I mean, what piece of advice can you give as far as dealing with other people's money and just helping them win using other capital?
It was our big pivot in 2016. It's what really allowed us to scale. And so for those people that are watching, one of the big things is we were able to run a very successful business that was doing 7 figures a year. In fact, we had even pushed into the 8-figure-a-year mark. And it wasn't until we actually got to 2016. What happened is you start getting a little bit older, go through a massive recession like 2008. And I felt stagnant. And I, in spite of making money, I think for a lot of people, especially once you get to a certain level, you sit back and you go, okay, what's next, right? Because a lot of us are here for the challenge, and it's for that next level of an accolade that you haven't been able to hit, the next milestone. One of the big things for me in 2016, when I was sitting back in my early 40s, is I sat back and I said, okay, Jerome, I got to have one more good run at this, and I really wanted to do something that was really going to push the needle. And so I think at that time, we probably were someplace between 25 million and 35 million, depending on how you evaluated our assets and our investments. But I'll tell you, we've been able to grow to a portfolio now of in excess of $600 million. And it's all through the means of being able to utilize other people's money. And we wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise, because we were always chasing our tail, working and making money. And then we take everything we make, we flush it into an investment, and then we go back and we make money again. And I was never using other people's money. So I tell people, you know, one of the biggest things that's been the large contributing factor to our growth over the last 5 to 6 years has really been utilizing other people's money.
Brilliant. So we say, yeah, I use other people's money, and most people understand that. When you're doing asset-based acquisitions, like in private equity, I guess you consider a company an asset, but also a real estate acquisition, all that requires that. But it's not just enough to say, you know, as every potential guru high level says, use OPM, and then they leave it at that.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, you really need to understand a certain language. Maybe you can walk us through a little bit of the importance of understanding the language of business and how that has helped you in raising capital, and maybe just give some people, let's peel it back a little deeper on that.
All right, let's go back. I'll take you guys way back. I got started in multi-level marketing in the early 90s. And I read the little book called Think and Grow Rich. I read it multiple times. And in that book, it talks about utilizing other people's money. So I thought I was using other people's money. I thought that what it really meant was taking money from clients and customers and pulling that money into your own proximity and utilizing that within your own business. I didn't realize that I had the ability, just like any large acquisition company, like a lot of the big syndications and stuff. I didn't know that stuff was available to me. And I think there's a lot of business owners out there that are very successful, and they just don't even know where to go to even get started on private sector capital. And it's huge right now. In fact, one of the big things, and I was just talking to my stock guy today, is he said, private equity is one of the largest, most available ways for small business owners and medium-sized business owners and even large business owners to get capital these days. And right now, with the market and interest rates going up, these guys are able to leverage their capital and make larger returns. Obviously, when interest rates get lower, the private equity funds and stuff won't be as lucrative, but you can actually place your money in a lot of these funds, and they're even backed. Even institutions are doing it now, like Goldman Sachs and some of the big guys are actually going in and they're raising private sector capital. They're institutionally backed. And what's cool about it is this, and most people don't know this, is that if there's ever a loss and there's ever a bankruptcy on any of the funds, it's the first thing that gets, private equity is the first thing that gets paid back before all other debts and all other equity. It's the number one first thing that gets paid back. Well, I didn't know any of this stuff. Obviously, since 2016, my financial literacy has expanded, and it was a personal choice, because I sat back and I said, okay, I've been doing this since the late 90s, and I've only grown this much to 2016. So I had 20 years in almost at that time. I was like 18 years into my professional career as an entrepreneur and in business. And I sat back and I go, I only got here in 20 years. So if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm just going to multiply that times 2, or maybe not, because I'm getting older. And that would be where I would foresee myself being in 20 years. And I thought, not acceptable. And so we really got into figuring out how to go after private sector money. People that have done well. There's affluency all over the world. And one thing that there's no lack of is money out there. And I do this to my kids, Brian. Like when we drive down the road, I tell them, look, Daddy owns, I'll show them my apartment complexes and I'll show them our warehouses and I'll show them the retail and that stuff that we own. But I'll tell them, I'll go, look at that building right there. That one building is worth over $70 million. And it's one little property in this mass of wealth that surrounds us every single day. And so when I started wrapping my head around utilizing other people's money and actually how to do it, I was able to raise capital, which is called the equity side of the investment, and leverage debt from the banks in order to go in and build large assets. So I could go in and raise equity of 20 or 30% and then get the bank to lend me 70 to 80%. Now in today's world, it's a little flipped. Now we're raising 40% of the equity through private sector money, family office, in other ways. And then the debt that we're getting in today's real world is closer to about 60% debt, loan to cost or loan to value, depending whether we're building or whether we're actually buying something.
Awesome, man. And so, a big part of, so there's this word called underwriting in the private investment space. And I remember in my early days when I was a beginner and I was like, I kept hearing this term underwriting and I was like, I have no idea what that is, but just smile and pretend like you know what's going on. And that was a long time ago. And so basically it just means you want to build the models and you're just like doing the due diligence, the research on the deal. How have you found, how important has having a good quality underwriter been as far as raising capital when you're starting out?
Yeah, I'll tell you that anybody watching, whether they're bad at math or anything, it's simple math. It's right. It's just addition and subtraction and a little bit of arithmetic and division. That's it. There's no algebraic equations. There's no fancy geometry. There's no fancy trigonometry. There's no, there's no calculus involved in this stuff. It's just simple math, right? So you go back to like just regular old 7th grade math. The biggest thing is spending time learning that stuff. I mean, how many hours do we spend in school, right? We spend 14,000 hours from the time we're in kindergarten all the way till we graduate high school. And in 14,000 hours, how much time was spent teaching you how to balance a checkbook or teaching you how to buy a house and understand like what your tax write-off is going to be on your house? And like, is it a good investment or is it a bad investment? 99% of people that buy homes don't even know that. Or I shouldn't say 99, it's close to about 95% of people, they don't even know that. And so underwriting is super important because it will keep you from going bankrupt or going into foreclosure, or at least decrease the risk factor in doing so. And what I mean by that is this. In 2008, when I went through the recession, I was building retail, the ground up. I had single family residential subdivisions going. We had restaurants, all kinds of different stuff. I didn't know what a cap rate was on real estate. I didn't know what it was. And I knew that it was the amount of money I made back from my investment, but I didn't know how to figure it out. I didn't know how to figure out values, like how that correlates to value. I didn't understand that stuff. And so one of the things that I really hyper focused on in 2016 was I said, if I'm going to take other people's money, I need to know this stuff inside and out. And underwriting will keep you safe. So much so that by 2018, I sat up in front of rooms and I started talking about this stuff. And I said, look, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to a place economically where we're going to hit a recession. I had no idea that the pandemic was going to artificially stimulate things to the magnitude that it did. Everybody's crystal ball was fogged at that point in time. But one thing that I did know is that we couldn't continue going up in value. Anybody who's anybody, when the market is going up, even all you have to have is a heartbeat and a pulse. That's it. If you got a heartbeat and a pulse, when the market's going up, you can make money. And what happens is people think that they're strategically amazing. They're like, I'm an investor and I can go out and make a ton of money. And I did X, Y, and Z. Now, the true investors, the true entrepreneurs, the true business people right now, their colors will shine. And the reason why is because they do understand how to underwrite stuff. Because now that the market is starting to falter and prices are going down on not just real estate, but stocks and companies and so forth. Now, when you can underwrite where your profitability will be in 5-10 years from now, based on information, historical information, knowing knowledge, how to be able to take cap rates, reverse them, and see how cap rates can positively or negatively affect values, and be able to go in and purchase correctly so that you have a business plan and a business model with strategic, real numbers to back what you're doing. That, ladies and gentlemen, that is how you protect yourself financially when the market falters. It's not when the market's going up that you're an amazing person. It's how can you make money when the market's on a decline and profit. That's when an amazing investor and amazing business people are built. And that all comes from the basis of underwriting.
Wow. So, I heard it once, and we'll use this analogy. You and I talked about this, but there was an analogy that in we'll say the medieval times, there was a certain religion that you can only read at the time, the word of God, and was in this particular language. And it was only available to the wealthy people and the clergy and all this stuff. And so for the quote unquote peasants who weren't allowed to learn the language and couldn't do that, they had to rely on the wealthy people. And it wasn't until Latin and all these translations of these holy books were able to roll out that people were able to be self-sustaining in that area. And, this concept was similar to today, but the language is different. And that language is accounting. It's the language of business. And there was a time and so that's also the billionaires and people who really understand it, folks. Like, this is what Jerome's talking about, is saying you really need to understand the language, right? Just like any other thing, you got to know what's going on. If anyone's ever spoken a foreign language around you and you're like, I'm not sure what's happening right now. And so learning the language, it unlocks a level of freedom just by understanding accounting, understanding underwriting, and really protecting yourself and your investors. And on this final note, there was a moment where I was fortunate enough to have lunch with Warren Buffett. And he said a lot of things, and good quality underwriting ties into what he taught me personally, which he said, Ryan, I make money when I buy, not when I sell. Now, I'm sure he said it in other circles as well. And, I was still in college and I was like, what does that even mean? And I realized that good quality underwriting will help you to uncover the golden nuggets, the good valuation, where the money is at. And so if you can find a company, understand the language of business, and you can really look at this thing and unpack it, now you're in a position to say, this is a good deal or this is not a good deal. In other words, back to my original question of how to win and how not to lose. Starts with what Jerome's saying is understand the language. Now, I mentioned how not to lose. What are some of those things in the early days that you can advise people who are just starting out on how not to lose?
Yeah. The shiny object syndrome is huge. When I started making money in the mid 90s and I was making like 20 grand a month, I started buying Range Rovers, lake houses, jet skis. I still had offices, and I was trying to afford expansion while still buying a bunch of junk I didn't need. And it wasn't until 97 we grew too fast, and we were shut down by the FTC because we scaled too big, too quick. And I was just a subcontractor for the company in multi-level marketing, but I was subjected to the same downturn that the company experienced. And it was in that moment that I sat back and said, man, if I would have just hung on to a little bit of that cash, invested it differently, I'd be at a different place in my life. And it's kind of what got me into real estate. Was in 98, I started investing in real estate because I just want to have something tangible, right? The shiny object syndrome doesn't just go with things. It goes with opportunities too, because we live in a world that is instant everything, right? Instant food, instant gratification, instant everything. And so in a world that we live in that offers instant everything, especially as people are scrolling up through Instagram right now or Facebook right now, and they're watching everybody in their Lamborghinis and their big yachts and their airplanes and helicopters and all this stuff. They're thinking, okay, what is that person doing that I'm not doing? And then they try focusing on that. And then they pull their foot off the pedal, and then they go focus on something different. One of the things that kept me going, Ryan, is I can't tell you how many times I turned to my wife and said, one more summer, because I own a concrete company. I started in 98. That's how I got into construction and real estate, is I started pouring concrete. We still own that company today. We've been in business for 26 years. And that company has made us multiple, 8 figures every single year, year over year over year over year for many years now. And I'll tell you that there's times that I saw buddies that got into fracking, bought fracking plants, and I wanted to migrate to it. There was times I had other buddies that opened up like debt consolidation companies, and I wanted to go focus on that. I had buddies that went to China with like Mark Spitz and the swimmer, and we're opening up other companies out in China. And I always came home, and in spite of hating the summers and in spite of hating having to get out there pouring concrete, the one thing that I hated most produced for me year after year, month after month, continuously, decade over decade, and has given me the ability to invest in real estate and continue feeding me. And I just tell people that don't have the shiny object syndrome where you're all over the place. Just find something that is profitable. I told people, that old saying that when you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. I think it's bullshit, because when the second what you start doing for work, whether it's something you love and it becomes work, it becomes work. It's just work. So don't do what you love. Do what bears you profits. Focus on what makes you money and then streamline it, and never sever an artery that holds cash flow and an income source. Never get rid of it. And that has truly been our saving grace through the 2008 recession, going through the pandemic, even going through what we're going through now. Not severing lifelines of financial gains has always protected us. And it's because in spite of me wanting out, I always stayed in. And if I look at the buddies that were making millions of dollars more than me a year, and we ante up all the years, I don't think that there's one of them that has amassed a fortune larger than ours and has a net worth larger than ours. And the only variance between what they did and I did is I never got the shiny object syndrome. I focused on my business, and I'm still the last man standing.
Man, brilliant. Holy cow. So avoid that shiny object syndrome. And sometimes, you start with something that's curiosity and all that. Sure, that's fine. But according to Jerome, like, my man, like you're saying, well, let's not forget why we're actually here and what keeps us here, which is profit. And so being profitable obviously is what gets us to making billion. Now, with that, so that's for the beginners listening. Let's punch it up a little bit. Let's talk about the market.
Yeah.
Specifically the markets that you're in. We mentioned real estate, private equity. You can go anywhere with this. But I'm curious, where, as far as the markets that you operate in, where's the market at? And the second question is, where is it going? Maybe you can walk us through a little bit of what you're seeing.
Yeah. So right now in the market, I think that people feel like we're getting beat up with high interest rates. I keep hearing all this stuff about high interest rates and inflation. And yes, we've experienced massive inflation, but you got to remember that we also printed $9 trillion worth of money that came into the market during the pandemic. So obviously, when there's money printed, it devalues our dollar bill. There's going to be automatic inflation. Now, interest rates, when you look at this stuff, Ryan, this is what I tell people. We have had some of the most incredible markets ever with interest rates when they were higher than they are right now. And what happened with the market is that people found this one time that we had this amazing historical low interest rates where the federal government actually stimulated the market and artificially helped stimulate things for us. And then we sit back going to 3% interest rates, and then we start leveraging real estate investments at 3% cap rates, and everything's getting compressed, right? Cap rates are getting compressed. Values are going up exponentially. And all of a sudden, people are just making astronomical amounts of money. But if you look back historically, we've never had 3% interest rates. We've never had 4% interest rates. There's been private sector banks, local, municipal credit unions that have offered 4% rates, but we haven't seen this through the public sector for a long period of time like we did in 2020, 2021. And so what happens, we hit these historical low rates, right? And now all of a sudden, those rates go up 2-3%. and the world goes into a frenzy. And I sit back and I go, look, guys, I was at a point in 2018 when I was buying multifamily and real estate in 2016. I saw cap rates go from an 8% cap rate to a 6% cap rate. And I started seeing cap rates get compressed. I met a guy at Gaming Ranch in Scottsdale, Arizona. These guys were selling off a $300 million storage portfolio at that time. And at that time, I couldn't fathom owning a $300 million portfolio. And he goes, and I asked him, why are you guys selling? Why did you guys decide to sell? Why wouldn't you guys just keep it? He goes, well, cap rates right now are compressed. And because cap rates are in a good place right now, we're going to sell because our portfolio will change in value if the cap rates go back up. At that time, that's when I really started understanding this stuff. And at that time, interest rates were right around 6%. I think cap rates were sitting right around 5.5%, 6%. And that's where I thought that the market was over leveraged. And so I sat back and said, you know what? This is crazy. I'm not going to buy real estate. I'm going to build it, because if I build it, I can walk into this stuff with like a 12% cap rate, double what that stuff is selling for. To me, it just made more sense. And that's where I got back into the ground up game instead of the value add game, because I've been in construction anyways. And so it was my saving grace. It was my protection against the market compression, not even knowing that it was going to happen. I already thought the market was getting compressed. I was comparing it to 2008. I was comparing it to the late 1990s. I was comparing it to the market crash in the 1980s during the Reagan administration. I was comparing it to all this stuff. And so I had no idea. So everybody else was living through this artificial stimulated market while I was sitting up on stage in 2018 telling people the market won't stay like this, ladies and gentlemen. And we are barely back to where we were at when I was talking about that in 2018. And Ryan, I believe that we're going to have some of the strongest economies moving forward, but I don't believe that interest rates are going to go down too much. And if they do and they stabilize, they're going to be slightly more stabilized. People just have to understand how to migrate through this market and now moving forward into the reality of what the world's going to bear over the next few years.
So wonderful. So where it's at is elevated but not high interest rates. What are you seeing as far, like you move a lot of weight on the real estate front? What's the sentiment out there? How are people seeing the market? What are they thinking?
Oh, they're scared.
Yeah.
It's like I talk about the market right now being almost like an addict going through rehabilitation, right? Yeah. Until an addict wants to be rehabilitated, they're in denial. And they live in denial until they're ready, until they have it, until they go through acceptance. And then when they go through acceptance, then they go to a healing phase. Right now, we still have a lot of investors in denial. There's going to be honest people that take a beating through this, honest, hardworking people. And it's unfortunate, but I think that there's people that really over leverage themselves. And there's a lot of people like syndicators out there that their business model, they don't make much money in the actual cash on cash return because most of them don't have much money in it. They give away 70% of the equity to investors and they hold the rest in debt. Mm-hmm. And then they make a small management fee where they make their money is on their internal rate of return. When they go in and they actually sell the property, that's where they make their money. So they usually do this every 3 to 5 years. So a lot of them, to be able to keep costs down and make a little bit more higher returns for their investors so that their investors are cheering for them and they're loving them, they do these 5-1 arms where they do a 5-year set rate and then it becomes an adjustable rate mortgage. And so this is just one example. But when those loans get called and that 5-1 arm, it's a fluctuating rate and you bought on a 3% cap rate and now you're bearing a 6% or better interest rate, how do you service the debt on that stuff? You can't. Yep. And so there's just not enough meat on the bone to service that debt. So what happens is there's now the banks are in a position where they take back the keys and they either have to reposition that debt with somebody else that's qualified, or it goes into foreclosure and becomes an REO, bank owned property. Man. So there's going to be a lot of that out there. There's a lot. I can go on this subject, Ryan, for the next day. Yeah. I could do a full weekend training on this.
I bet you can, man, with your background. So it was, it's more of a humorous thing. I think, again, we're talking Warren Buffett all day today for some reason, but I think it was him or his partner that said the 3 L's that bring down any or beat up an investors: leverage, liquor, and ladies. If you ever heard that saying, right? I mean, they're funny guys and they're just telling the jokes. They're saying, hey, like we're in our 90s. We've been in this game for a while. We could say those 3 for sure. You count on.
Well, you ever been to Berkshire Hathaway? You ever watch those guys during their annual meetings?
Yes, I have.
We went 3 times. Oh man, it was unbelievable.
That was a good time. They certainly have a mountain of wisdom, and so do you. So we're looking at so almost blood in the streets, or people are starting to feel it a little bit. Interest rates, we're in a new market. They're elevated but not high. That's where it's at. Now, I'm curious, the second question is, where do you see it going? I mean, we've got a lot of things, whether it's problems, whether it's solutions, whatever those are. I'd love to know your sentiment as far as from your perspective and opinion, not financial advice, folks, but just your opinion. Where do you see the market going?
Yeah, I've been classified as a real estate guy, but I truly believe that I'm just a business entrepreneur. I've owned all kinds of stuff and I've invested in all kinds of stuff. And the reason I don't think that I'm just a straight real estate guy is because most real estate guys own no stocks, no investments outside of real estate. They believe 100%. I am whole and whole diversified. So I have cryptocurrencies, not a lot. That's probably my downfall right now. And I own a lot of stocks. And now we're even buying bonds in the bond market because the bond market is kicking ass right now, and so there's a lot of opportunity there. And so I think what people aren't paying attention to right now, they really need to, is electronic currencies, and they really need to pay attention to commodities. People aren't paying attention to commodities, and they're not paying attention to, a good segment of the world is paying attention to electronic currencies, but commodities, this is how the world actually functions, right? Is volatility in the market. When you're talking about energy, and I'm not just talking like wind turbines and solar, but oil, oil transport, logistics, and it's not just about the commodities, but how are they moving, right? You take a look at some of the biggest companies out there that most people think are like retailers. You take a look at companies like Amazon. Okay. You take a look at companies like Walmart. You take a look at companies like Home Depot. Those three companies are leading the world in logistics right now. It's all about transport. It's it's not just about how you get information, but how do you get goods and services, right? Because the tech industry is all about, okay, we're in an information age and a tech age where information is shifting, right? But logistics and getting things places from overseas to the end user and doing it in a monetary fashion where you get it yesterday, right? And we live in that instantaneous world that I was talking about earlier. Logistics and commodities are huge right now. And I think the oil industry, we need to start pumping oil. I believe the Keystone Pipeline needs to get opened up. I think that'll fix a lot of our inflationary problems that we've been seeing. It'll help even our unemployment rate, which is still good right now. It's not bad. Our unemployment is still just over 3%, which anything under 6% is considered good. Most recessionary markets, unemployment has to go up to 6%, but it will still help all those things. And we would savor being the world's power as far as financial power if we started drilling oil again. So I take a look at all this stuff, and I'm looking at electronic currency. We're going to be in a world where we're living under a world currency, not a nation's currency. And we're not living under the US currency being the strongest currency or the Chinese yen being the second strongest currency. We're going to look at electronic currencies being one of the dominant and only currencies as life continues to evolve. And I think that's where the world's really going. I know that's loaded, Ryan. I know that's loaded. I'm kind of going like big pictures, and I'm talking large macro scale, right? And then there's real estate, right? Like the real estate sector. You have to have an affordability factor to whatever you're doing right now, or it has to support logistics, warehouse, distribution, or multifamily with affordable components. Because Ryan, as incredible as your community is, as incredible of entrepreneurs that we have on here, we still will never change the statistics. 97% of our population will be working class professionals. 3% of the population controls 95% of the world's wealth. And the other 5% of the world, or the other 3% of the world shares 5% of the world's wealth. It's absolutely crazy. So I'm just telling people, focus on these areas because this is where we're evolving, at least while we're here on Earth.
Wow, brilliant. So interest rates, digital currencies, commodities. I mean, we've got a lot of things. Now, on the more advanced side, and folks, you'd be surprised that advanced data or advanced cheat codes actually come in a very simplistic way. As those of you who follow the show who have been saying this for years, the two most valuable assets is R&R, reputation, relationships. But we're not here to ask about my cheat codes. Everybody knows what those are. Curious about you. What have you found to certain things that have given you, let's say 3 to 5 things that you've considered to be the cheat codes?
Yeah, relationships are huge. Networking is big. I'll tell you that in early years, I think some of the hardest things when you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, right? I'll tell all you young people out there that don't want to go to college, go to some of the hardest colleges and most strategic colleges with wealthy people, because it doesn't even matter if you fail. Just go in there and just get by. I don't even care if you get D's and C's or whatever. Just get by. Go take art, and go take history, or go take salsa dancing, and go take whatever. It doesn't even matter, because the information you're getting there is going to be pot shit. It's not going to help you in life, right? Like world history, all that stuff. It's not going to help you in life. Maybe economics, macro, micro, maybe some of the maths, that stuff will help you. English helped me because I became a good document reader and I became a good writer to a certain point. But relationships, ladies and gentlemen, relationships. Get yourselves to some of the most strategic universities where there's wealthy people, because when you put yourself in proximity with people that have money, you all of a sudden start to think like them. You walk like them, you talk like them, you think like them. And all of a sudden, if you do what they do and you're around them, guess what automatically happens to your bank account and everything that you're doing in life? It starts to grow. And so I tell my kids, be strategic. When you go to college, go to college. And when you go to college, the reason we go to college is, yes, you want to learn. Like, I don't want to encourage my kids to go ahead and fail or go and take, classes that are not worth their time. But the whole point being, I'm exaggerating it a little bit, Ryan, just to be a little bit facetious on the, on one end. But I really want to just tell people, like, relationships are huge. And as you grow and evolve and you're in business, my relationships are so invaluable to me. And so as long as you never compromise your ethics, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, and exercise those relationships with care. Make sure that you always exercising relationships, because they'll pay dividends forever. That's one big piece of advice that I give young people, is network and relationships, because you never know who you don't know, but somebody else knows who you do need to know. And when you're positioning yourself correctly with the right relationships, they will introduce you to people that will open doors for you as you move and migrate through your entire career.
I love that. It reminds me of something that I've taught probably over 1,000 people how to start their own investment fund. And to that point of you've heard me say reputation, relationships are kind of the two most valuable assets people have. But then if we unpack that, just to echo your point a little further, is I say this a little facetiously. However, I say, look, millionaires collect things, billionaires collect people. So depending on how you're doing, what game you're playing, like you make a few bucks, what do you do next, right? Like you said, in the early days, you just went shopping and you started collecting things. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. I encourage that. You make money, reward yourself, celebrate. That's okay. But if that's your end game, you're not thinking big enough. And so what Jerome and I are trying to help you understand is some of these cheat codes, as I warned you before, they come very simple terms. Is some of the greatest competitive advantage is your network. Right. And there's all network is your net worth. And all these people find these catchy phrases to throw around. But at the end of the day, you want to be the guy who picks up the phone, raises $100 million while he's standing in line with his kids at Disneyland. So by collecting people, you can start making things happen, not only for yourself, but for people you care about, which, again, further strengthens your relationships. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
awesome.
100%.
We see a lot of unaffordability in housing, right? You're a real estate guy, you're many things, you're an entrepreneur, but you definitely understand real estate. Now, affordability is one issue, and that's a hot topic. You're hearing it in political conversations and all over the place. But we look at the asset that's built on the land, but you still need land. And so if some people are saying, let's just build more homes. Okay, well, then that requires to unlock more land. What's your opinion as far as land investing or anything like that, as far as giving yourself a competitive advantage? I'd love to hear what you think about land.
Yeah, a great question, Ryan. Our whole business model behind what we do is about buying land and building houses. And there's two different sides to this whole story. There's a caveat to it. So I'm going to contradict myself slightly as I explain this, because I want people to understand that we have an affordability issue across the world right now. Okay. I tell people, for me, Ryan, buying a piece of land and building houses has been my saving grace. I wasn't born with wealth, and and even now, I still work. Like today, I was checking on concrete guys, and I was out checking levels of forms for this big massive pour that my guys have tomorrow morning. So I'm humbled to that stuff, because that's where I come from, right? But I'll tell you guys, land is important to understand. Like I tell people to be careful with land, because if you buy too much land, it doesn't hold any long-term value in regards to return on investment and a cash flow basis. Long-term, it will give you a return on investment if you sell it and you're positioned in the strategically correct area. But if you just go out and buy a little parcel of land and you build a house, I tell people there's a business model behind it where you service the upper demographics, the upper 24%, which is the upper middle class. That constitutes for 24% of home buyers. And these folks, when the market gets compressed, Ryan, they're not struggling to pay their mortgage. They're not sitting back trying to steal from Peter to pay Paul. They have affluency. They've worked a 30-year career. Most of them that are full-time employees, they've done well. Some of these might be our parents or grandparents or people that have strategically positioned themselves. And at the time where a pension was the way to go for most Americans that were living just a good middle-class life, those are the folks that are constituting for the 16% of homes that are being purchased in cash right now. It's them folks. It's not the lower median. There's a little trickle down there, but the vast majority of them are in the upper middle class. And so I tell people, why compete with the masses? Why compete with the big builders like D.R. Horton and Pulte and Lennar Homes and KB Homes and all these guys? They're working on volume. Like, I don't want to build in volume. I did that at one point in time. I'll never do that again. I made as much money building 12 homes a year as I did building 70 a year. And it's because I was servicing payroll and I was feeding the beast. So I tell people, you can go out and build 4 homes a year. And if right now, if you focus methodically on homes that are reselling for between $600,000 and $1 million, and you kind of stay in that sweet spot of 700 to like 800, 850,000, you'll amass $200,000, $250,000 net profits. If you do it correctly and you do 4 homes, you're netting $1 million a year. You're in the top 1/10 of 1% of all money earners since the history of Adam and Eve doing that. And you can do it part-time, So I love that business model. I think that if a listener's in here and they're just getting started and they're sitting back going, I just want to make some money, I'd sit back and go get a set of plans that looks like this, and this is money because you could take this to a bank, get it appraised, get a loan and go build it and bear a $200,000 profit. I did it with no experience. I didn't know anything about construction. So anyways, that's just kind of my little give to the listeners. I think it's a great give. And I think, it's different kind of off the path of things. And the reason I said I was going to contradict myself is because I tell people, okay, you have $1 million, you're going to pay $400,000 of that in taxes. So now you have $600,000. So instead, why don't you go invest in tangible asset that you can depreciate and mitigate away from capital gains taxes? This is actually active income. It's not even capital gains. This is active income. It's not even capital gains. So you can write off everything you do, like the office I'm standing in, my car, everything, right? The dinners, the lunches that I go, the food I buy for my staff, whatever it is, I write it all off. Now, you take that money and you invest it into an asset that is cash producing. And I tell people the number one asset class you should be looking at right now is housing, multiple roofs. So multifamily has been our go-to, but not just traditional multifamily. This is where the business model tips, right? We're building and taking money from the upper middle class, but we're positioning strategically that money, focusing on multifamily that has an affordability component to it that services the lower demographics of people that can't afford those homes. And that's the vast majority of our population. Now that'll give you passive income. That's where you'll make money long-term.
Brilliant, man. Brilliant. I threatened you with 3 to 5. So what's the third thing that you would say for people starting out looking for a competitive advantage, and really how do we speed them up and compress your decades into days for people? What's something else that you can leave behind?
Yeah. I think buying businesses is a great place right now. It seems like there's a ton of people that are promoting this now. And I'll tell you guys, in your own backyard, there's people like me. And I use myself as an example. Ryan and I, we kind of talked about this briefly. And I use myself as a perfect example, ladies and gentlemen. So I know that there's sellers out there that are exactly like I am. To sell a business strategically, you got to build the EBITDA. You got to build the profits. You got to build that business to a point where you can maximize its true potential to maximize its values. Most business owners don't know how to do that. They're mom and pop shops. 85% of the world is employed by mom and pop employers. And they're all over the place. Millions and millions of small business owners all over the place. And if most of them, they get to a point like the pandemic was a great place where people just said they were in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And they're like, you know what? I've had a good run. I'm done. I'm going to sell my business, close my business down without even selling it. A lot of people do that. There's people like me. I've had a 26-year run with my concrete company, for sake of example. And I even see people like Grant and Brian Dawson. These guys are doing this stuff now where they're doing with their 10X ventures. They're taking like heating and cooling companies and landscape companies and all these guys that they're to go out and teach them how to buy these businesses and then accelerate them, or people that own these businesses and teach them how to really scale them. You can go buy companies like mine, like a concrete company. I'll tell you guys, when I sell my concrete company, I'm not going to sell it for the highest profitability. I'm going to sell it for the highest profitability that I can in the current state that it's in. And it's a great business. We're doing solid 8 figures. And when I say 8 figures, we're a $14 million a year company. So when you come in and you take a look at that, it's a very lucrative company. So we get calls, Ryan, from people every single day that they call in and say, hey, do you need more business? That's the phone call that comes into our office every day. Do you need more business? And we tell them, nope, we sure don't. We don't want no more business. We don't want to grow no more. We're happy exactly the way it is. Because if I grow my business, guess what I have to do, Brian? I got to manage it. I got to manage more employees. I got to grow it. I got to hire more middle management, more executives. I got to be a bigger beast to feed. And we were there at one point in time. We scaled down in 2008, not by choice, but it actually worked out very strategically. And I can take the brilliance and try to pat my back, but it wasn't my idea at all. But buying businesses is great because you go find a Jerome Maldonado out there that ran a 26-year company. I soaked the capital out of all that business. I put it into real estate. Now my big holdings are in real estate and in other stuff, but predominantly real estate. And I have no desire to get the EBITDA to its maximum. So come buy the business for a 3 times multiplier, then take that thing to a 20, 30, 40, $50 million a year business, and then go sell that thing for a 3 or 4 times multiplier. That's how you go do it. Or you can go in and get owner financing. If you're brand new getting started, you can go in, to a business owner that owns a mom and pop shop, maybe not a $14 million a year company, but a company that's doing a solid $650,000 to $1 million a year. And maybe they're taking home a 25-30% profit where they're making $250,000 take home. That's a great living. You're in the top money earners across the world. You're doing that. You're in the upper middle class and you're doing extremely well. You can go in and ask them to owner finance it, where they hold a percentage of the company until you pay it off. And if you don't pay it off, they get the business back. And you work your ass off to go in and make that business work. And the benefits to it is there's systems and processes that are already put in place. All you have to do is go in there and duplicate them, improve them. And I think that's a great way for small business owners or people that are looking to get into the market to get in and start bearing profits with very little money out of pocket.
Man, brilliant. So relationships, land, and buying a business, man. So these are some of those cheat codes to just help accelerate it. Notice how everything he said didn't involve a paycheck, did it? So doing private deals, which is all we talk about on this show. Before, as we round third base and we look to wrap things up, is there anything at all that you would like to mention to our followers? Anything at all?
I guess in summary, there's free resources out there for you guys. And I don't have anything to sell you guys. I don't have anything to give you guys other than wisdom and knowledge. I tell you guys, follow some of our content. A lot of what you guys are getting right here from Ryan is absolutely priceless. The people, I watch this podcast. I go in and I watch this podcast. I listen to the people that Ryan has on here, and it's just free information, guys. It's free information, and it's something that you can't get anywhere. One thing that I tell you guys is that one of the big things, Ryan, and I'll just kind of go organic on this stuff, that you come on to and you watch shows like this. You're trying to gravitate and get one thing. And I tell people, you can't get a PhD overnight. It's impossible. You can't do it in one show. And so in summary, ladies and gentlemen, position yourself to be a lifelong learner. I'm almost 50 years old. I've been learning my whole life. Every Saturday morning, I'm still listening to stuff. I'm still trying to figure things out. The market's migrating right now, and we're in uncharted territories. It's always going to be like this. There's always going to be uncharted territories. Never stop learning. And if I can give anybody, the reason we do our educational platform and we give so much content out on YouTube and all the other social media platforms is if we can change the lives of one person and we can improve the life of one person, then it's worth its weight in gold. We get a lot of deal flow from that stuff, but I'll tell you, it's really cool to be in the airport. I was coming out of Vegas the other day, and a gentleman ran up to me and he goes, "Are you Jerome Maldonado?" And not that many people. I'm not a celebrity. I don't have that many people come up. It's like this one guy. I'm like, yeah, I'm Jerome Maldonado, right? And he goes, "Man, you changed my life." He goes, I watched all your videos on YouTube, and I built a house, and I'm on my fourth one now. And, my first one, I didn't do as good. I only made $130,000, but this last house, I made over $280,000, and I'm on my fourth house. And, that makes me feel, I'm like, and I'm like, people around looking around, I'm like, damn, I was like, that's way cool. I'm like, I want this testimonial to be for everybody to hear it, but it's only one person. And what if that one person is you?
Yeah, brilliantly said. Thank you for that. And, just to summarize, some of the tips are relationships, right? So make sure you nurture them. You understand, right? You hang out with 9 millionaires, you become the 10th. You hang out with 9 troublemakers, you become the 10th. The other thing that he mentioned was land, raw land right now. People are, a lot of politicians, everybody are saying, hey, man, if we're going to bring it down, we got to start building a lot to increase the supply, to reduce the cost. Great. Whoever's holding land, you're in a good place. But whether you buy raw land, get entitlements and make a few bucks off that and resell it, up to you. And then the third thing is learn how to buy a business. And that ties to the earlier point is, in order to do that, either you learn the language of business, which is accounting, or you find people who do. You do these things and you too will be well on your way in your pursuit of making billions.
Wow, what a show. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Now, if you haven't done so already, be sure to leave a comment and review on new ideas and guests you want me to bring on for future episodes. Plus, why don't you head over to YouTube and see extra takes while you get to know our guests even better. And make sure to come back for our next episode where we dive even deeper into the people, the process, and the perspectives of both investors and founders. Until then, my friends, stay hungry, focus on your goals, and keep grinding towards your dream of making billions.